Mr. Ernest Wilde.
How are you, my dear Ernest? What brings you up to town?
Pleasure, pleasure. What else should bring anybody anywhere? Eating, I see, Algy.
I believe it is customary in good society to make some slight refreshment at 5 o'clock. Where have you been since last Thursday?
Oh, in the country.
What on earth do you do there?
Well, when one is in town, one amuses oneself. When one is in the country, one amuses other people. It's excessively boring.
Got nice neighbours in your part of Shropshire? By the way, Shropshire is your county, is it not?
Shropshire? Oh, yes, Shropshire. Why these cups? Why the cucumber sandwiches? Why such reckless extravagance in one so young? Who's coming to tea?
Merely Aunt Augusta and Gwendolen.
How perfectly delightful.
That is all very well, but I don't think that Aunt Augusta will quite approve of your being here.
May I ask why?
My dear fellow, the way you flirt with Gwendolen is perfectly disgraceful. It's almost as bad as the way Gwendolen flirts with you.
I am in love with Gwendolen. I have come up to town expressly to propose to her.
I thought you'd come up for pleasure. I call that business. Don't touch the cucumber sandwiches, especially ordered for Aunt Augusta.
Well, you've been eating them all the time.
That's quite a different matter. She's my aunt. Have some bread and butter. The bread and butter is for Gwendolen. Gwendolen is devoted to bread and butter.
Very good bread and butter, it is true.
My dear fellow, you need not eat as though you're going to eat the whole thing. You act as though you're married to her already. You are not married to her already, and I don't think you ever will be.
Why on earth do you say that?
Well, in the first place, girls don't marry the men they flirt with. Girls don't think it right.
Oh, that is nonsense.
It isn't. It's a great truth. It accounts for the extraordinary number of bachelors one sees all over the place. In the second place, I don't give my consent.
Your consent?
My dear fellow, Gwendolen is my first cousin, and before I allow you to marry her, you'll have to clear up the whole question of Cecily.
Cecily? What on earth do you mean? What do you mean, Algy, by Cecily? I don't know anyone by the name of Cecily.
I happen to have the cigarette case you left in the smoking room last time you dined here.
Well, I wish to goodness you'd let me know sooner. I've been writing frantic letters to Scotland Yard about it. I verily need to offer a large reward.
Well, I wish you would. I happen to be more than usually hard up.
Well, there's no point in offering a large reward now the thing is found.
Really, Ernest? I think that is rather mean of you. However, that makes no matter. For as I read the inscription inside, I see that the thing isn't yours after all.
Of course it's mine. You've seen me with it 100 times, and you have no right to read what is written inside. It is a very ungentlemanly thing to read a private cigarette case.
It's absurd to have a hard and fast rule about what one should read and what one shouldn't. More than half of modern culture depends on what one shouldn't read.
I'm well aware of that, and I have no desire to discuss modern culture. I simply want my cigarette case back.
But this isn't your cigarette case. This cigarette case is a present from someone of the name of Cecily, and you said you didn't know of anyone of that name.
Well, if you really must know, and Cecily happens to be my aunt.
Your aunt?
Yes, charming old lady, too, lives in Tunbridge Wells. For heaven's sake, give it back to me, Algy.
But why does she call herself Little Cecily if she is your aunt and lives in Tunbridge Wells? This is from Little Cecily with her fondest love.
If you fellow, what is there in that? Some aunts are tall, some aunts are not tall. Surely it is a matter that an aunt can be allowed to decide for herself. You seem to think every aunt should be exactly like your aunt. That is absurd. Now, for heaven's sake, give me back my cigarette case.
But why does your aunt call you her uncle? From Little Cecily with her fondest love to her dear Uncle Jack. There is no objection, I admit, to an aunt being a small aunt. But why an aunt, no matter what her size may be, should call her own nephew her uncle, I can't quite make out. Besides, your name isn't Jack at all. It's Ernest.
'Tisn't Ernest, it's Jack.
You have always told me it was Ernest. I've introduced you to everyone as Ernest. You answer to the name of Ernest. You look as though your name was Ernest. You are the most earnest-looking person I've ever seen in my life. It's absurd you're saying your name isn't Ernest. It's on your cards. Here's one of them. Mr. Ernest Worthing, B4, the Albany. I'll keep this as proof that your name is Ernest if ever you attempt to deny it to me, or to Gwendolen, or to anyone else.
Well, my name is Ernest, in town, and Jack in the country. And the cigarette case was given me in the country.
But that does not explain the fact that your aunt calls you her dear uncle. Come, old boy. You really better have the thing on at once.
My dear fellow, you sound as if you're trying to talk like a dentist. It is very vulgar to talk like a dentist when one isn't a dentist. It produces a false impression.
Well, that is what dentists always do. Now, go on. Tell me the whole thing. And I must mention that I've always suspected you of being a confirmed and secret Bunburyist. And I'm quite sure of it now.
A Bunburyist? What on earth do you mean by a Bunburyist?
I will reveal to you the meaning of that incomparable expression as soon as you are kind enough to tell me why you are Ernest in town and Jack in the country.
Well, produce my cigarette case first.
Here it is. Now, produce your explanation. And pray, make it improbable.
Oh, my good fellow, there's nothing improbable about my explanation at all. In fact, it is quite ordinary. Old Mr. Thomas Cardew, who adopted me when I was a boy, made me in his will guardian to his granddaughter, Cecily Cardew, who has been raised in Spain. Cecily, who out of motives of respect calls me her uncle, you cannot appreciate that, now lives at my country place under the charge of her admirable governess, Miss Prism.
Where is that place in the country, by the way?
That is nothing to you, dear boy. You're not going to be invited. And I may candidly tell you that it is not in Shropshire.
I suspected that, dear fellow. I have Bunburied all over Shropshire on 2 separate occasions. Now go on. Why are you Ernest in town and Jack in the country?
Oh, my dear Algy, I don't know if you can understand my real motives. You're not nearly serious enough. When one is placed in the position of guardian, one must adopt a high moral tone in all subjects. It is one's duty to do so. And as a high moral tone can hardly be said to conduce very much to either one's health or happiness, in order to get up to town, I've always pretended to have a younger brother named Earnest, who lives in the Albany and gets into the most dreadful scrapes. That, my dear Algy, is the whole truth, pure and simple.
The truth is rarely pure and never simple. What you really are is a Bunburyist. I was quite right in saying you were a Bunburyist. In fact, you are one of the most advanced Bunburyists I know.
What on earth do you mean?
You have invented a very useful younger brother called Ernest, in order that you may be able to come up to town as often as you like. I have invented an invaluable permanent invalid called Bunbury, in order that I may be able to go down into the country whenever I choose. Bunbury is perfectly invaluable. If it weren't for Bunbury's extraordinary bad health, for instance, I wouldn't be able to dine with you tonight at Willis's, for I have really been engaged to Aunt Augusta for over a week now.
I haven't invited you to dine with me anywhere tonight.
Yes, I know. You're absurdly careless about sending out invitations. However,
You had much better dine with your Aunt Augusta tonight.
oh, I haven't got the smallest intention of doing anything of the kind. In the first place, I dine there on Monday, and once a week is quite enough to dine with one's own relations. And in the second place, I know exactly whom she will place me next to. She will place me next to Mary Farquhar, who always flirts with her own husband across the dinner table. That is not very pleasant. Indeed, it is not even decent. Besides, now that I know you to be a confirmed Bunburyist, I want to tell you all the rules.
My dear fellow, I'm not a Bunburyist at all. If Gwendolyn accepts me, I'm going to kill my brother. Indeed, I think I should kill him in any case. Cecily is a little too much interested in him. He's rather a bore. So I'm going to get rid of Ernest. And I strongly advise you to do the same with your invalid friend with the absurd name.
Nothing will induce me to part with Bunbury. And if you ever get married, which seems to be extremely problematic, you will be very glad to know Bunbury. A man who marries without knowing Bunbury has a very tedious time of it.
Oh, that is nonsense. If I marry a charming girl like Gwendolyn, and she is the only girl in the world I would ever want to marry, I certainly won't want to know Bunbury.
Then your wife will. You don't seem to realize that in married life, 3 is company, and 2 is none. That must be Aunt Augusta. Only relatives or creditors ring in such a Wagnerian manner. Now, if I can get her out of the way for 10 minutes so that you have the opportunity of proposing to Gwendolyn, may I dine with you tonight at Willis's?
I suppose so, if you want to.
Yes, but you must be serious about it. I hate people who are not serious about meals. It's so shallow of them.
I hope you are behaving very well.
I am feeling very well, Aunt Augusta.
That's not quite the same thing. The two things rarely go together.
Dear me, aren't you smart?
I am always smart, am I not, Mr. Wilde?
You are quite perfect, Miss Fairfax.
Oh, I hope I am not that. It would leave no room for developments, and I intend to develop in many directions.
I'm sorry if we are a little late, Alderman, but I was obliged to call on dear Lady Horbury. I never saw a woman so altered. She looks quite 20 years younger. And now, I'll have a cup of tea and one of those nice cucumber sandwiches you promised me.
Certainly, Aunt Augusta.
Won't you come and sit here, Gwendolen?
Thanks, Mama. I'm quite comfortable where I am.
Good heavens! Why are there no cucumber sandwiches? I ordered them specially. I'm most distressed, Aunt Augusta.
That makes very little matter, Algernon. I had some crumpets with dear Lady Horbury, who seems to me to be living entirely to pleasure now.
I hear her hair has turned quite gold from grief.
And it certainly has changed its colour. From what cause I, of course, cannot say. Thank you. And I've a special treat for you tonight, Algernon. I'm going to send you down with Mary Pátzcuaro. She's such a nice woman, and so attentive to her husband. It's delightful to watch her.
I'm afraid, Aunt Augusta, that I shall not have to give up the pleasure of dining with you tonight after all.
I hope not, Algernon. It would put my table completely out. Your uncle would have to dine upstairs. Fortunately, he is accustomed to that.
Oh, it is a great bore, and I need hardly say a terrible disappointment to me. But the fact is, I've had a telegram to say that my poor friend Bunbury has fallen very ill again, and they seem to think that I should be with him.
Well, I must say, Algernon, that I think it is high time that this Mr. Bunbury made up his mind whether he was going to live or to die. This shilly-shallying with the question is absurd. Nor do I approve of the modern sympathy with invalids. Illness of any kind is hardly a thing to be encouraged in others. Health is the primary duty of life. I'm always telling that to your poor uncle, though he never seems to take much notice, as far as any improvement in his ailment is concerned. I should be much obliged, Algernon, if you would ask Mr. Bunbury, from me, to be kind enough not to have a relapse on Saturday. For I rely on you to arrange my music for me. It is my last reception, and one wants something that will encourage conversation. Particularly at the end of the season, when everyone has practically said whatever they had to say, which in most cases was probably not much.
I'll speak to Bunbury, Aunt Augusta, if he is still conscious. And I think I can assure you that he'll be all right by Saturday. Of course, the music is a great difficulty. You see, if one plays good music, people don't listen. If one plays bad music, people don't talk. But I'll run over the program I've drawn up if you will kindly accompany me to the next room program.
Thank you, Algernon. It's very thoughtful of you. I'm sure the program will be delightful. Gwendolen, you will accompany me.
Certainly, Mama.
Bread and butter, Miss Fairfax?
Oh, thank you.
A charming day it has been, Miss Fairfax.
Pray don't talk to me about the weather, Mr. Worthing. Whenever people talk to me about the weather, I feel certain they mean something else.
I do mean something else.
I thought so. I am never wrong.
And I would like to be allowed to take advantage of Lady Bracknell's temporary absence in order to tell you that.
I would certainly advise you to do so. Mama has a way of coming back suddenly into a room that I have often had to speak to her about.
Ah, Miss Fairfax, ever since I met you, I have admired you more than any girl I have ever met since I met you.
Yes, I'm quite well aware of the fact, and I often wish that in public at any rate, you had been more demonstrative. To me, you have an irresistible fascination. Even before I met you, I was far from indifferent to you. Your Christian name has inspired me. My ideal has always been to love someone of the name of Earnest. From the moment Algernon first mentioned to me that he had a friend called Earnest, I knew I was destined to love you.
Do you really love me, Gwendolen?
Passionately.
Oh, you don't know how happy you've made me?
My own Ernest.
But you don't really mean to say you couldn't love me if my name wasn't Earnest.
But your name is Ernest.
Yes, I know it is. But what if it was something else? Do you mean to say you couldn't love me then?
That is clearly metaphysical speculation. And like all metaphysical speculation, it bears very little resemblance to the real world as we know it.
Personally, darling, I don't really much care for the name of Ernest. I don't think it suits me at all.
Oh no, it suits you perfectly. It has a music all its own. It produces vibrations.
But really, Gwendolyn, I must say I really think there are lots of other much nicer names. I think Jack, for instance, is a charming name.
Oh no, Jack. There is very little music in the name Jack, indeed any at all. It produces no vibrations. I have known several Jacks, and they were all more than usually plain. And besides, Jack is a domesticity for John, and I pity any woman married to a man called John. She would probably never be allowed to know the entrancing pleasure of a moment's solitude. No, the only really safe name is Ernest.
Oh, Gwendolyn, I must get christened as soon as possible. Now, we must get married as soon as possible. There's no time to be lost.
Married, Mr. Worthing?
But surely you know that I love you, and you have led me to believe you are not absolutely indifferent to me.
I adore you, but you have not proposed to me yet. Nothing at all has been said on the topic of marriage. The topic has not even come up yet.
Well, may I propose to you now?
I think it an admirable opportunity. And to spare you any possible disappointment, Mr. Worthing, I want you to know that I am fully determined to accept you.
Oh, Gwendolyn.
Yes, Mr. Worthing, what have you got to say to me?
You know what I've got to say to you.
Yes, but you don't say it.
Oh. Gwendolyn. Gwendolyn. Will you marry me?
Of course, darling.
Oh.
But how long you've been about it? I think you've had very little practice in how to propose.
Oh, my own darling, I've never loved anyone in the world but you.
I understand that, but men often propose for practice. All my girlfriends tell me so. Ernest, you have beautiful brown eyes. They are quite deep and fine. I hope you will always look at me just this way, especially when there are other people present.
Mr. Worthing,
Mama!
rise, sir, from that semi-recumbent posture.
Mama, this is no place for you. I must beg you to retire. Besides, Mr. Worthing is not finished yet.
It is most indecorous. And may I ask, what? Finished what?
Mama, Mr. Worthing and I are engaged to be married.
Pardon me, but you are not engaged to anyone. When you do become engaged to someone, I, or your father, should his health permit him, will advise you that an engagement should come upon a young girl as a surprise, pleasant or unpleasant, as the case may be. It is hardly a thing that a girl should be allowed to arrange for herself. And now, I have a few questions to put to you, Mr. Worthing. While I am making these inquiries, you, Gwendolyn, will wait for me below in the carriage.
Mama.
In the carriage, Gwendolyn?
Certainly, Mama.
Gwendolyn, the carriage. You may take a seat, Mr. Worthing.
Thank you, Lady Bracknell. I prefer standing.
I feel bound to tell you that you are not down on my list of eligible young men. But I'm ready to enter your name, should your answers to my questions be what a really affectionate mother requires. Do you smoke?
Well, yes, I admit I do smoke.
I am pleased to hear it. A man should always have some occupation. There are far too many idle men in London as it is. How old are you?
39.
39. A good age to be married at. I have always been of the opinion that a man who desires to get married should know either everything or nothing. Which do you know?
I know nothing, Lady Bracknell.
I'm glad to hear it. I do not approve of anything that tampers with natural ignorance. Ignorance is like a delicate exotic fruit. Touch it, and the bloom is gone. The whole theory of modern education is radically unsound. Fortunately, in England at any rate, education produces nothing whatsoever. If it did, it would be a serious danger to the upper classes. What is your income?
Oh, between 7,000 and 8,000 a year.
In land or investment?
Oh, in investments chiefly.
That is satisfactory. What between the duties expected of one while one is alive and the duties extracted from one after one's death, land has ceased to be either a profit or a pleasure. It gives one position and prevents one from keeping it up. That is all that can be said about land.
Now, I have a country house with some land attached to it, of course, about 1,500 acres, I believe. But it is not what I depend on for my real income. In fact, as far as I can make out, the poachers are the only people who make anything out of it.
A country house. How many bedrooms? Well, that is a point that can be settled later. You do have a townhouse, I hope. A girl with a simple, unspoiled nature like Gwendolyn could hardly be expected to reside in the country.
I have a house in Belgrave Square, but it is let by the year to Lady Bloxham. Of course, I can have it back whenever I like at 6 months' notice.
Lady Bloxham? I don't know her.
She doesn't go out much, a lady considerably advanced in years.
That is no guarantee of respectability of character. What number in Belgrave Square?
149.
The unfashionable side. I thought there was something. Well, that could easily be altered.
The fashion or the side?
Both, if necessary, I presume. What are your politics?
Well, I'm afraid I really have none. I'm a liberal unionist.
They count as Tories. They dine with us, or come in the evening at any rate. And now, to minor matters. Are your parents living?
I have lost both my parents.
To lose one parent, Mr. Wilde, may be regarded as a misfortune, but to lose both looks like carelessness. Who was your father? He was evidently a man of some wealth. Was he born in what the radical papers call the purple of commerce? Or did he rise from the ranks of the aristocracy?
I'm afraid I really don't know. And the fact is, Lady Bracknell, I said I had lost my parents. It would perhaps be nearer the truth to say that my parents seem to have lost me. I don't actually know who I am by birth. I was found.
Found?
The late Mr. Thomas Cardew, an elderly gentleman of integrity and charity and character, found me when I was a little boy, when I was an infant, and gave me the name of Worthing. Because he happened to have a first-class ticket for Worthing in his pocket at the time. So I don't actually know who I am by birth.
And where did the charitable gentleman with a first-class ticket to a seaside resort come find you?
In a handbag.
A handbag?
Yes, Lady Bracknell, I was in a handbag, a rather large black leather handbag with handles. Ordinary handbag, as a matter of fact.
In what locality did this charitable gentleman, this James or Thomas Cardew, come across this ordinary handbag?
In the cloakroom at Victoria Station. It was given him in mistake for his own.
The cloakroom at Victoria Station?
Yes, the Brighton line.
The line is immaterial, Mr. Wilde. I confess I feel somewhat bewildered by what you just told me. To be born, or at any rate bred in a handbag, seems to me to display a contempt for the ordinary decencies of family life that remind one of the worst excesses of the French Revolution. And you know, with that unfortunate movement led to. As for the locality in which the handbag was found, the cloakroom at a railway station might serve to conceal a certain social indiscretion, but it could hardly be regarded as an astute basis for a recognized position in good society.
Well, then what would you advise me to do? I need hardly add that I would do anything in the world to ensure Gwendolyn's happiness.
I would strongly advise you, Mr. Worthing, to try and acquire some relations as soon as possible, and to produce at least one parent of either sex before the season is quite over.
I don't see how I could possibly manage to do that. I can produce the handbag at any moment. Did you see my dressing room at home? Surely that should satisfy you, Lady Bracknell.
Me, sir? What has it to do with me? You could hardly imagine that I and Lord Bracknell could dream of allowing our dear Cecily, our only daughter, to form an alliance, to marry into a cloakroom and form an alliance with a parcel. Good morning, Mr. Worthing.
Good morning.
Oh, did it go off all right, old boy? You don't mean to say Gwendolyn refused you? I noted the way she has. She's always refusing people. I think it moves in nature.
Oh, Gwendolyn is right as a trivet. As far as she's concerned, we're engaged. Her mother is positively unbearable. I never met such a gorgon. I don't know what a gorgon is like exactly, but I'm quite sure Lady Bracknell is one. At any rate, she is a monster, without being a myth, which is rather unfair. I beg your pardon, Algy. I suppose I shouldn't talk to you about your own aunt in that way before you.
My dear fellow, I love hearing my relations abused. It's the only thing that makes me put up with them at all.
What nonsense.
Relations are simply a tedious pack of people who haven't got the remotest knowledge how to live, nor the smallest instinct of when to die.
That is nonsense.
It isn't.
Oh, you always want to argue. I don't want to argue. You always want to argue about things.
That's what things were always made for.
Well, on my word, if I thought that, I would shoot myself. You don't think there's any chance, do you, of Gwendolyn becoming like her mother in about 150 years' time, do you?
All women become like their mothers. That is a tragedy. No man does. That's his.
Is that clever?
Well, it's perfectly phrased and quite as true as any observation in civilized life should be.
Oh, I'm sick to death of cleverness. Everybody is clever nowadays. You can't go anywhere without meeting clever people. I wish to heavens we had a good few fools left.
We have. By the way, did you tell Gwendolyn the truth about your being Earnest in town and Jack in the country?
Oh, my dear fellow, the truth is not the kind of thing one tells to a nice, sweet, refined girl. Oh, what extraordinary ideas you have about how to behave to a woman.
The only way to behave to a woman is to make love to her if she's pretty, and to someone else if she's plain.
Oh, that is nonsense.
What about your brother? What about the profligate Earnest?
Oh, by the end of the week I shall have got rid of him. I'll say he died in Paris of apoplexy. Lots of people die of apoplexy quite suddenly, don't they, Algy?
Yes, but it's hereditary, my dear friend.
Oh.
It's the sort of thing that runs in families.
Oh.
You'd much better say a severe chill.
Oh, you're quite sure a severe chill isn't hereditary or anything of that kind.
Of course it isn't.
Very well then. My poor brother Ernest carried off suddenly in Paris by a severe chill. That gets rid of him.
But I thought you said that Miss Cardew was a little too much interested in your poor brother Ernest. Won't you feel his loss a great deal?
Oh no, that's all right. Cecily's not a sweet romantic girl, I'm glad to say. She takes long walks, has a capital appetite, pays no attention at all to her lessons.
I should rather like to see Cecily.
I will take care you never do. She's excessively pretty and only just 18.
Have you told Gwendolyn yet that you have an excessively pretty ward who's only just 18?
One doesn't blurt these things out to people. Gwendolyn and Cecily are sure to become extremely great friends. I bet you anything you like that half an hour after they have met, they will be calling each other sister.
Women only do that when they've called each other a lot of other things first. Now, my dear fellow, if we want to get a good table at Willis's, we really must go and dress.
turn your back. I have something very particular to say to Mr. Worthing.
Really, Gwendolyn, I don't think I can allow this at all.
Algy, you always adopt a strictly immoral attitude towards life, and I don't think you're quite old enough to pull it off.
My own darling.
Ernest, we may never be married. From the expression on Mamma's face, I feel we never shall. Few parents nowadays pay any regard to what their children say to them. Any influence I had over Mamma I lost at the age of 3. But although she may prevent us from becoming man and wife, and I may marry someone else, and marry often, nothing that Mamma can possibly do can alter my eternal devotion to you.
Oh, dear Gwendolyn.
The story of your romantic origin, as related to me just now by Mamma with unpleasant comments, has naturally stirred the deeper fibers of my nature. The simplicity of your character makes you exquisitely incomprehensible to me. Your Christian name is magnificent. Yes. I have your address in town at the Albany. What is your address in the country?
The Manor House, Walton, Hertfordshire.
There is a good postal service, I suppose. It may be necessary to do something desperate. That, of course, will require serious consideration. I will communicate with you daily.
Oh, my own one.
Algy, you may turn around now.
Thanks, I've turned it on already.
You may call a carriage.
You will let me see you to your carriage, my darling.
Certainly.
I will see Miss Fairfax. Whew. Now there's a sensible, intellectual girl. The only girl in my life I've ever cared for. What on earth are you so amused at?
Oh, nothing, I'm just a little worried about poor Bunbury, that's all.
Your friend Bunbury, if you're not careful, will get you into a serious scrape one of these days.
I love scrapes. They are the only things that are never serious.
Oh, that is nonsense, Algy. You never speak anything but nonsense.
Nobody ever does.
I'm going to get out of the way as soon as we start. I'm just going to step back. Some of these guys are, there's no way to get above them.
Surely such a utilitarian occupation as the watering of flowers is rather Moulton's job than yours, especially at a moment when intellectual pleasures await you. Your German grammar is on the table. Hurry open it at page 15. We will repeat yesterday's lesson.
But I don't like German. It isn't at all a becoming language. I know perfectly well that I look quite plain after my German lesson.
Child, you know how anxious your guardian is that you should improve yourself in every way. He laid particular stress on your German as he was leaving for town yesterday. Indeed, he always lays particular stress on your German when he's leaving for town.
Dear Uncle Jack is so very serious. Sometimes he's so serious that I think he cannot be quite well.
Your guardian enjoys the best of health, and his gravity of demeanor is especially to be commended in one so comparatively young as he is. I know no one else with a higher sense of duty and responsibility.
I suppose that is why he overlooks a little work when we three are together.
Cecily, I'm surprised at you. Mr. Worthing has many troubles in his life. Idle merriment and triviality would be out of place in his conversation. You must remember his constant anxiety about that unfortunate young man, his brother.
Oh, I wish Uncle Jack would allow that unfortunate young man, his brother, to come down here sometimes. We might have a good influence over him, Miss Prism. I'm sure you certainly would.
I do not even think that I could produce any effect on a character that, according to his own brother's admission, is irretrievably weak and vacillating. Indeed, I'm not sure that I would desire to reclaim him. I am not in favor of this modern mania for turning bad people into good people at a moment's notice. As a man sows, so shall he reap. Cecily, put your diary away. I don't see why you keep one at all.
I keep a diary in order to enter the wonderful secrets of my life. If I didn't write them down, I should probably forget all about them.
Memory, my dear Cecily, is the diary that we all carry about with us.
Yes, but it usually chronicles the things that have never happened or couldn't possibly have happened. Memory is responsible for nearly all the 3-volume novels Muddy sends us.
Do not speak slightingly of the 3-volume novel, Cecily. I wrote one myself in younger days.
Did you really, Miss Prism? Oh, how wonderfully clever you are. I hope it did not end happily. I don't like novels that end happily. They depress me so much.
The good ended happily, the bad unhappily. That is what fiction is.
I suppose, but it seems very unfair. And was your novel ever published?
Alas, no, the manuscript was abandoned.
Abandoned?
I use the word in the sense of lost or mislaid. To your work, child. These speculations are profitless.
But I see dear Dr. Chasuble coming up through the dark.
Dr. Chasuble, this is indeed a pleasure.
And how are we this morning? Miss Prism, I trust you are well.
Miss Prism has just been complaining of a slight headache. I think it would do her much good to have a short stroll with you in the park, Dr. Chasuble.
Cecily, I did not mention anything about a headache.
No, dear Miss Prism, I know that, but I felt instinctively that you had a headache. Indeed, I was thinking about that and not about my German lesson when the rector came in.
Cecily, I do hope you are not inattentive.
Oh, I'm afraid I am.
That is strange. Were I fortunate enough to be Miss Prism's pupil, I would hang upon her lips. Oh, I spoke metaphorically. My metaphor was drawn from bees. Mr. Worthing, I suppose, has not yet returned from town.
We do not expect him until Monday afternoon.
Ah, yes. He usually likes to spend his Sundays in London. He's not one of those whose sole aim is enjoyment, as, by all accounts, an unfortunate young man his brother seems to be. But I must not disturb Egeria and her pupil any longer.
Egeria? My name is Laetitia, Doctor.
A classical illusion, merely drawn from the pagan authors. I shall see you both, no doubt, even so.
I think, dear Doctor, that I will have a stroll with you. It seems I have a sad headache, after all.
With pleasure, Miss Prism, with pleasure.
Cecily, that would be delightful. Cecily, you will read your political economy in my absence. The chapter on the fall of the rupee you may omit. It is somewhat too sensational. These metallic problems have their melodramatic side.
Horrid political economy, horrid geography, horrid geography.
Mr. Ernest Worthing.
You are my little cousin Cecily, I'm sure.
You are under some strange mistake. I am not little. In fact, I believe that I am more than usually tall for my age. But I am your cousin Cecily. You are Uncle Jack's brother, my cousin Ernest, my wicked cousin Ernest.
Oh, I'm not really wicked at all, cousin Cecily. You mustn't think that I'm wicked.
Well, if you're not, then you certainly have been deceiving us all in a very inexcusable manner, pretending to be wicked and being really good all the time. I hope you have not been leading a double life.
Of course course, I have been rather reckless.
I'm glad to hear it.
In fact, now that you mention the subject, I've been very bad in my own small way.
I don't think you should be so proud of that, though I am sure it must have been very pleasant.
It's much pleasanter being here with you.
I can't understand how you're here at all. Uncle Jack won't be back till Monday afternoon.
Oh, that is a great disappointment. I am obliged to go by first train Monday morning. I have a business appointment I am anxious to miss.
Could you miss it anywhere but in London?
No, the appointment is in London.
Well, I know, of course, how important it is not to keep a business engagement if one wants to retain any sense of the beauty of life. But still, I think you had better wait until Uncle Jack arrives. I know he wants to speak to you about your emigrating.
About my what?
You're emigrating. He's gone out to buy your outfit.
Oh, I certainly wouldn't let Jack buy my outfit. He's got no taste in neckties at all.
I don't think you will require neckties. Uncle Jack is sending you to Australia.
Australia? I'd sooner die.
Well, he said at dinner on Wednesday night that you would have to choose between this world, the next world, and Australia.
Well, the accounts I've received of Australia and the next world are not particularly encouraging. This world is good enough for me, Cousin Cecily.
Yes, but are you good enough for it?
Well, I'm afraid I'm not that. That's why I want you to reform me. You might make that your mission, if you don't mind, Cousin Cecily.
Oh, I'm afraid I've no time this afternoon.
Well, would you mind my reforming myself this afternoon?
It is rather quixotic, but I think you should try.
I will. I feel better already.
You're looking a little worse.
Now, that is because I'm hungry.
Oh, have thoughtless of me. I should have remembered that when one is going to lead an entirely new life, one requires regular and wholesome meals. Won't you come in?
Thank you. Might I have a buttonhole first? I never have any appetite unless I have a buttonhole first.
A actual meal?
No, I'd sooner have a pink rose.
Why?
Because you, Cousin Cecily, are like a pink rose.
I don't think it can be right for you to talk to me like that. Miss Prism never says such things to me.
Then Miss Prism is a short-sighted old lady. You are the prettiest girl I ever saw.
Miss Prism says that all good looks are a snare.
A snare every sensible man would like to be caught in.
I don't think I would care to catch a sensible man. I should know what to talk to him about.
You are too much alone, dear doctor. You should get married. A misanthrope I can understand. A womanthrope, never.
Believe me, I do not deserve so neologistic a phrase. The precept as well as the practice of the primitive church was distinctly against matrimony.
That is obviously the reason why the primitive church has not lasted to the present day. And you do not seem to realize, dear doctor, that by persistently remaining single, a man converts himself to a permanent public temptation. Men should be more careful. This very celibacy leads weaker vessels astray.
But is a man not equally attractive when married?
No married man is ever attractive, except to his wife.
And often I've been told not even to her.
That depends on the sympathies of the woman. Maturity can always be counted on. Ripeness can be trusted. Young women are green. I spoke horticulturally. My metaphor was drawn from fruits. But where is Cecily?
Perhaps she follows to the schools in that.
Mr. Worthing!
Mr. Worthing?
What a surprise! We did not expect you till Monday afternoon.
I have returned sooner than I expected. Dr. Chasuble, I hope you are well.
But dear Mr. Worthing, I trust this garb of woe does not betoken some terrible affliction.
My brother.
More shameful debts and extravagances?
Still leading his life of pleasure.
Dead.
Your brother Earnest dead?
Quite dead.
Oh, what a lesson for him! I trust he will profit by it.
Mr. Worthing, I offer you my sincere condolence. You have at least the consolation of knowing that you're always the most generous and forgiving of brothers.
Oh, poor Ernest. He had many faults. But it is a sad, sad blow.
Very sad indeed. Were you with him at the end?
No, he died abroad, in Paris, in fact. I had a telegram last night from the manager of the Grand Hotel.
Was the cause of death mentioned?
A severe chill, it seems.
As a man sows, so shall he reap.
Charity, my dear Miss Prism, charity. None of us is perfect. I myself am terribly susceptible to drafts. Will the interment take place here?
No, he seems to have expressed the desire to be buried in Paris.
In Paris. I fear that hardly points to any very serious state of mind at the last. You would no doubt wish me to make some slight allusion to this tragic domestic affliction next Sunday. My sermon on the meaning of manna in the wilderness can be adapted to almost any occasion. Joyful, or in the present case, distressing. I have preached it at harvest celebrations, christenings, confirmations, on days of humiliation, and festal days. The last time I delivered it was in the cathedral as a charity sermon on behalf of the Society for the Prevention of Discontent among the upper orders. And the bishop, who was present, was most taken by some of the analogies I drew.
That reminds me, you mentioned christenings, I think, Dr. Chasuble. I suppose you know how to christen all right? I mean, you are continually christening, are you not?
It is, I regret to say, one of the rector's most constant duties in this parish. I have often spoken to the lower classes on it, but they don't seem to know what thrift is.
But is there any particular infant in whom you are interested, Mr. Worthing? I mean, your brother was, from what I understand, unmarried, was he not?
Oh, yes.
People who live entirely for pleasure usually are.
But it is not for any infant, dear doctor. I'm very fond of children, but the fact is, I would like to be christened myself this afternoon, if you have nothing better to do.
But surely, Mr. Worthing, you have been christened already.
Don't remember anything about it.
Well, have you any grave doubts on the subject?
I certainly intend to have. Of course, I don't know if it would bother you in any way, or if you think I'm a little too old now.
Not at all. Sprinkling, and indeed the immersion of adults, is a perfectly canonical practice.
Immersion?
Oh, you need have no apprehension. Sprinkling is all that is necessary, or indeed I think advisable. Our weather is so changeable. At what hour would you wish the ceremony performed?
Would 5:30 do?
Admirably, admirably. And now, dear Mr. Worthing, I will not intrude any longer into a house of sorrow. I would merely beg of you not to be too bowed down by grief. And what seem to us bitter trials are often blessings in disguise.
This seems to me a blessing of an extremely obvious kind.
Uncle Jack, we're pleased to see you back. But what horrid clothes you have got on, do go and change them.
Cecily!
My child, my child.
What's the matter, Uncle Jack? Do be happy. You look as if you had a toothache, and I have got such a surprise for you. Guess who is in the dining room? Your brother. Our brother Ernest. He arrived about half an hour ago.
What nonsense! I haven't got a brother.
Oh, say that. However badly he may have behaved to you in the past, he's still your brother. You couldn't be so heartless as to disown him. I'll tell him to come up, and you will shake hands with him, won't you, Uncle Jack?
These are very joyful tidings.
Having been all but resigned to his loss, his sudden return seems to be peculiarly distressing.
My brother in the dining room? What does it all mean? This is perfectly absurd. Good heavens!
Brother John, I have come down from town to tell you that I'm very sorry for all the trouble I've given you. And that I intend to lead a better life in the future.
Uncle Jack, you're not going to refuse your own brother's hand?
Nothing would induce me to take his hand. I think he's coming down here disgraceful. He knows perfectly well why.
Uncle Jack, do be nice. There's good in everyone. Ernest has just been telling me about his poor invalid friend, Mr. Bunbury, whom he goes to visit so often. And there must be much good in one who's kind to an invalid and leaves the pleasures of London to sit by a bed of pain.
So he's been talking to you about Bunbury, has he?
Yes, he's told me all about poor Mr. Bunbury and his terrible state of health.
Bunbury, I won't have him talking to you about Bunbury or anything else. It is enough to try one perfectly frantic.
Oh, I admit that all the faults were on my side. But I must say that I think that Brother John's coldness to me is peculiarly painful. I expected a more enthusiastic welcome, especially considering that it is the first time I've come here.
Uncle Jack, if you don't shake hands with Ernest, I will never forgive you.
Never forgive me?
Never, never, never!
Very well. But it is the last time I shall ever do it.
It is pleasant, is it not, to see so perfect a reconciliation? I think we should leave the two brothers here together.
Cecily, you will come with us.
Certainly, Miss Grissom. My little task of reconciliation is over.
You have done a beautiful task this afternoon, dear child.
We must not be premature in our judgments.
I feel very happy.
You young scoundrel, Algy, you've got to get out of this place as soon as possible. I won't have any Bunbury here.
I'm afraid I can only stay a week this time.
I'll call the dog cart for you. I'll say you've suddenly been called back to town.
What a fearful liar you are, Jack. I have not been called back down to town.
How?
I haven't heard anyone.
Your duty as a gentleman calls you.
My duty as a gentleman has never interfered with my pleasures to the smallest degree.
Oh, I can quite understand that.
Well, Cecily is a darling.
I won't have you talk of Miss Cardew like that. I don't like it.
Well, I don't like your clothes. You look ridiculous in them. Why on earth don't you go up and change? It's perfectly childish to be in deep mourning for a man who's actually staying for a whole week in your house with your sickness. You're grotesque.
You are not staying for me a whole week in my house as a guest or anything else. You've got to leave immediately by the 4:05 train.
I certainly won't leave you as long as you are in mourning. It would be most unfriendly.
Will you go if I change my clothes?
Yes, if you're not too long. I never saw anyone take so long to dress and with so little result.
It's better than being always overdressed as you are.
If I am occasionally a little overdressed, I make up for it by being always immensely overeducated.
Your vanity is ridiculous. And your conduct is an outrage. And your presence in my garden is perfectly absurd. But you've got to catch the 4:05. And I hope you have a pleasant journey back to town. This bunburying, as you call it, has not been a great success for you.
I think it has been a great success. I'm in love with Cecily, and that is everything. But I must see her before I go and make arrangements for another bunbury. Ah, there she is.
Oh, I merely came back to water the roses. I thought you were with Uncle Jack.
He's gone to order the dog cart for me.
Oh, is he going to take you for a nice drive?
He's going to send me away.
Oh, then have we got to part?
I'm afraid so. It's a painful parting.
It is always painful to part from people whom one has known for a very brief space of time.
Thank you.
The dog cart is at the door, sir.
It can wait 5 minutes.
Cecily, I hope I shall not offend you if I state quite frankly and openly that you seem to me to be in every way the visible personification of absolute perfection.
I think your frankness does you great credit, Ernest. If you will allow me, I will copy your remarks into my diary.
Do you really keep a diary? Oh, I'd give anything to see it, may I?
Oh no, when it appears in volume 4, I hope you will order a copy. But pray, Ernest, don't stop. I delight in taking down from dictation. I have reached absolute perfection. You can go on now. I'm quite ready for more. But don't cough, Ernest. When one is dictating, one should speak fluently and not cough. Besides, I don't know how to spell a cough.
Cecily, ever since I first looked upon your wonderful and incomparable beauty, I have dared to love you wildly, passionately, devotedly, hopelessly.
Oh, I don't think you should tell me that you love me wildly, passionately, devotedly, hopelessly. Hopelessly doesn't seem to make much sense, does it?
Cecily,
The dog cart is waiting, sir.
tell it to come round next week at the same hour.
I think Uncle Jack would be very much annoyed if he knew you're staying till next week at the same hour.
I don't care about Jack. I don't care for anyone in the whole world but you. I love you, Cecily. You will marry me, won't you?
You silly boy? Of course! Why, we have been engaged for the last 3 months.
For the last 3 months.
It will be exactly 3 months, on Thursday.
But when did we become engaged?
On the 14th of February last. Since Uncle Jack first said to us that he had a brother who was very wicked and bad, you, of course, have become very attractive. I dare say it was foolish of me, but I fell in love with you, Ernest.
Darling, and when was the engagement actually settled?
On the 14th of February last, worn out by your entire ignorance of my existence, I determined to end the matter one way or the other. And after a long struggle with myself, I accepted you under this little tree here. The next day, I bought this little ring in your name, and this is a bangle with a true lover's knot that I promise you always to wear.
Did I give you this? It's very pretty, isn't it?
Yes, you have wonderfully good taste, Ernest. It's the excuse I've given for your leading such a bad life. And here is a box in which I keep all your dear letters.
My letters? But my dear, sweet Cecily, I have never written you any letters.
You need hardly remind me of that, Ernest. I remember only too well that I was forced to write your letters for you. I wrote always, 3 times a week, and sometimes oftener.
Oh, do let me see them.
Oh, no, I couldn't possibly. They would make you far too conceited. The 3 ones you wrote me after I had broken off the engagement are so beautiful and so badly spelled that even now I can hardly read them without crying a little.
But was the engagement ever broken off?
Of course it was. You can see the entry, if you like, on the 22nd of March. Today, I broke off my engagement with Ernest. I feel it is better to do so. The weather still continues charming.
Why on earth did you break it off? What had I done? I had done nothing. Cecily, I am very much hurt indeed to hear that you broke it off, particularly when the weather was so charming.
It would have hardly been a really serious engagement if it hadn't been broken off at least once. But I forgave you before the week was out.
What a perfect angel you are, Cecily.
You dear romantic boy.
You'll never break it off again.
No, I don't think I could break it off now that I have actually met you. Besides, of course, there is the question of your name.
Oh, yes, of course.
You must not laugh at me, darling, but it had always been a girlish dream of mine to love someone whose name was Earnest. There is something in that name that seems to inspire absolute confidence.
But my dear child, do you mean to say you could not love me if I had some other name?
But what name?
Oh, any name you like. Algernon, for instance.
Oh, no, Algernon. Oh, I don't like it, no.
My dear, sweet, loving little darling, I really don't see why you should object to the name of Algernon. It's not at all a bad name. In fact, it's a rather aristocratic name. Half the chumps that get into bankruptcy court are called Algernon. But seriously, would you love me if my name were Algie?
I might respect you, Ernest. I might admire your character, but I fear I should not be able to give you my undivided attention.
Cecily, your rector here is, I suppose, thoroughly experienced in the practice of all the rites and ceremonials of the church?
Oh, yes, Dr. Chasuble is a most learned man. He has never written a single book. You can imagine how much he knows.
I must see him at once on a most important christening, on most important business.
Oh, no!
I shan't be away more than half an hour.
Considering that we have been engaged since February the 14th, and that I only met you today, couldn't you make 20 minutes?
I'll be back in no time.
What an impetuous boy he is! I must enter his proposal in my diary.
Miss Fairfax is here to see Mr. Worthing on very important business.
Miss Fairfax, I suppose one of the many good elderly women who are associated with Uncle Jack in some of his philanthropic work in London. Pray let me introduce myself to you. My name is Cecily Cardew.
Cecily Cardew, what a very sweet name. I like you already more than I can say. My first impressions of people are never wrong.
Oh, how nice of you to like me so much after having known each other for such a comparatively short time. Please sit down.
You will call me Gwendolyn, won't you?
If you wish.
And may I call you Cecily?
With pleasure.
Then it is all settled, is it not?
I hope so.
Perhaps this might be a favorable opportunity for my mentioning who I am. My father is Lord Bracknell. You have never heard of Papa, I suppose?
I don't think so.
Outside the family circle, Papa, I am glad to say, is entirely unknown. I think that's quite as it should be. Seems to me the proper sphere is for the man's in the home. Cecily, Mama, whose views on education are remarkably strict, has brought me up to be extremely short-sighted. So do you mind, part of the system, do you mind if I look at you more closely?
Not at all, Gwendolyn. I am very fond of being looked at.
You are here on a short visit, I suppose?
Oh no, I live here.
Your mother then, or some elderly female relative resides here with you also?
No, I have no mother, nor in fact any relations.
Indeed.
My dear guardian, with the assistance of Miss Prism, has the arduous task of looking after me.
Your guardian?
Yes, I am Mr. Worthing's ward.
Oh, Mr. Worthing never mentioned to me that he had a ward. How secretive of him. He grows more interesting hourly. I must admit, however, Cecily, that now that I know you are Mr. Worthing's ward, I cannot help stating the fact that I wish you were not quite so very alluring as you seem to be, and I wish you were a little older than it appears to me you are. In fact, if I may speak candidly.
Pray do. Whenever one has something unpleasant to say, one should always be quite candid.
Well, to speak with perfect candor, Cecily, I wish that you were fully 42 and more than usually plain for your age. Ernest has a strong, upright nature, but even men of the highest possible moral caliber cannot help but being extremely influenced by the physical charms of others.
I beg your pardon, Gwendolyn, did you say Ernest?
Yes.
Oh, but it is not Mr. Ernest Worthing who is my guardian. It is his brother, his elder brother.
Ernest never mentioned to me that he had a brother.
I'm sorry to say they have not been on good terms for a long time.
That explains it. Cecily, you've lifted a load from my mind. I was growing almost anxious. It would be terrible, would it not, if any cloud had come across a friendship such as ours. Of course, it is not Mr. Ernest Worthing who is your guardian?
It is not, I'm quite sure. In fact, I am going to be his.
I beg your pardon?
Dearest Gwendolyn, there is no reason why I should make a secret of it to you. Mr. Ernest Worthing and I are engaged to be married.
I think there must be some slight error, my dear Cecily. Mr. Ernest Worthing is engaged to me.
I'm afraid you must be under some misconception. Ernest proposed to me exactly 10 minutes ago.
Oh. It is certainly very curious, for he asked me to be his wife yesterday afternoon at 5:30. If you would care to verify the incident, pray do so. I never travel without my diary. One should always have something sensational to read in the train. I am so sorry, dear Cecily, if it is any disappointment to you, but I am afraid I have the prior claim.
It would distress me more than I can tell you, dear Gwendolyn, if it caused you any mental or physical anguish, but I feel bound to point out that since Ernest proposed to you, he clearly has changed his mind.
The poor fellow has been trapped by any foolish promise. I will consider it my duty to rescue him at once, and with a firm hand.
Whatever unfortunate entanglement my dear boy may have got into, I will never reproach him with it after we're married.
Do you allude to me, Miss Cardew, as an entanglement? You are presumptuous. On an occasion like this, it becomes more than a moral duty to speak one's mind, It becomes a pleasure.
Do you suggest, Mr. Fairfax, that I haven't trapped Ernest into an engagement? How dare you? This is no time for wearing the shallow mask of manners. When I see a spade, I call it a spade.
I'm glad to say that I've never seen a spade. Our social spheres have obviously been widely different.
May I offer you some tea, Miss Fairfax?
Thank you. Detestable girl, but I require tea.
Sugar?
No, thank you. Sugar is no longer fashionable.
Cake or bread and butter?
Bread and butter, please. Cake is rarely served in the best houses nowadays. You have filled my tea with lumps of sugar, and when I asked expressly for bread and butter, you have given me cake. I am known for the gentleness of my disposition and the extraordinary sweetness of my nature. But I warn you, Miss Cardew, you may go too far.
To save my poor, innocent, trusting boy from the machinations of any other girl, there are no lengths to which I would not go.
From the moment I saw you, I distrusted you. I felt that you were false and deceitful. In these matters, I am never wrong.
Your first impressions of people
Are
seem
invariably correct. That's right.
It seems to me, Miss Fairfax, that I may be trespassing on your valuable time. No doubt you have many other calls of a similar character to make in the neighborhood.
Ernest, my own Ernest.
Dear Gwendolyn, dearest.
A moment. Are you engaged to this young lady?
To dear little Cecily? Of course not. What could have put such an idea into your pretty little head?
I knew there must be some misunderstanding, Miss Fairfax. The gentleman whose arm is at present round your waist is my guardian, Mr. John Worthing.
I beg your pardon?
This is Uncle Jack.
Jack? Oh!
Here is Ernest.
My own one.
A moment, Ernest. May I ask, are you engaged to be married to this young lady?
What young lady? Good heavens, Gwendolyn!
Yes, the good heavens, Gwendolyn. I mean to Gwendolyn.
Of course not. What could have put such an idea into your pretty little head?
Oh, thank you.
I felt there must be some slight error, Miss Cardew. The gentleman who is now embracing you is my cousin, Mr. Algernon Moncrief.
Algernon Moncrief? Oh!
Is your name really John?
I could deny it if I like. I could deny anything if I like. But it certainly is John. It's been John for years.
A gross deception has been practiced on both of us.
My poor, wounded Cecily.
My sweet wrong Gwendolyn.
You will call me sister, won't you?
There is just one question that I would like to be allowed to ask my guardian.
An admirable idea, Mr. Worthing. There is just one question I would like to be asked, I would like to put to you. Where is your brother Ernest? We are both engaged to be married to your brother Ernest, so it is a matter of some importance. Where is
Gwendolyn, Cecily, it is very painful for a man to be forced to speak the truth. It is the first time in my life I've ever been reduced to such a painful position. And I'm quite inexperienced at doing anything of the kind. But I will tell you quite frankly, I have no brother, Ernest. I have no brother at all. I have never had a brother in my life. And I certainly haven't the smallest intention of ever having one in the future.
No brother at all?
None.
Have you never had a brother of any kind?
Never, not of any kind.
I am afraid it is quite clear, Cecily, that neither of us is engaged to anyone.
It is not a very pleasant position for a young girl suddenly to find herself in, is it?
No. Let us go into the house. They will hardly follow us there.
No, men are so cowardly, aren't they?
Well, the only small satisfaction I have in this whole wretched business is that your friend Bunbury is quite exploded. You won't be able to run down to the country quite as often as you used to do. And a good thing, too.
Your brother is a little off color, isn't he, dear Jack? You won't be able to disappear into London as frequently as your wicked custom was, and not a bad thing either.
And for your conduct to Miss Cardew, I think you're taking in a sweet, simple, innocent girl like that is quite inexcusable, to say nothing of the fact that she's my ward.
I can see no possible defense at all for your deceiving a brilliant, clever, thoroughly experienced young woman like Miss Fairfax.
I wanted to be engaged to Gwendolen. I love her.
I simply wanted to be engaged to Cecily. I adore her.
Well, there's certainly no chance of your marrying Miss Cardew.
I don't think there's much likelihood, Jack, of you and Miss Fairfax being united.
Oh, well, that's no business of yours.
If it was my business, I wouldn't talk about it. Only people like stockbrokers do that. And then merely at dinner party.
How you can sit there calmly eating muffins when we are in this terrible trouble I can't make out? It seems to me you're perfectly heartless.
Well, I can't eat muffins in an agitated manner. The butter would probably get on my cuffs. One should always eat muffins quite calmly. It is the only way to eat them.
I say it is perfectly heartless you're eating muffins at all under the circumstances.
When I am in trouble, eating is the only thing that consoles me. At the present moment, I'm eating muffins because I am unhappy. Besides, I am particularly fond of muffins.
Well, Algernon, I wish to goodness you would go.
You can't possibly ask me to go without having some dinner. I never go without my dinner. Nobody ever does, except for vegetarians and people like that. Besides, I've made arrangements with Dr. Chasuble to be christened at 5:45 under the name of Earnest.
My dear fellow, the sooner you rid yourself of that nonsense, the better. I made arrangements this morning with Dr. Chasuble to rechristen myself at 5:30. I will naturally take the name of Earnest. Gwendolen would wish it. I have a perfect right to be christened if I want to. There's no evidence that I've ever been christened by anybody. It is different in your case. You have been christened already.
Yes, but I haven't been christened in years.
But you have been christened already. That is the important thing.
Quite so. So I know my constitution can stand it. If you are not quite certain about your ever having been christened, I dare say I think it rather dangerous you're venturing on it now. It might make you quite unwell. You can hardly have forgotten that someone very closely connected to you was very nearly carried off in Paris this week by a severe chill.
You said yourself a severe chill was not hereditary.
It used to be, I know, but I dare say it is now. Science is always making wonderful improvements in things.
That is nonsense. You're always talking nonsense.
Jack, you are at the muffins again. I wish you wouldn't. I'm particularly fond of muffins.
Algernon, I have already told you to go. I don't want you here. Why don't you go?
I haven't quite finished my tea yet. And I've still 2 muffins left.
Into the house as anyone else would have done seems to me to show that they have some sense of shame left.
They have been eating muffins. That looks like repentance.
They don't seem to notice us at all. Couldn't you cough?
But I haven't got a cough.
They're looking at us. What effrontery.
They're approaching. I got very forward of them.
But we will not be the first to to speak, let us preserve a dignified silence.
It is the only thing to do now.
This dignified silence seems to produce an unpleasant effect.
A most distasteful one.
But we will not be the first to speak.
Certainly not.
Mr. Worthing, I have something very particular to ask you.
Gwendoline!
Much depends on your reply.
Your common sense is invaluable. Mr. Moncrief, kindly answer me the following question. Why did you pretend to be my guardian's brother?
In order to have the opportunity of meeting you.
That certainly seems a satisfactory explanation.
Yes, dear, if you can believe him.
Oh, I don't. But that doesn't affect the wonderful beauty of his answer.
True, in matters of grave importance, style, not sincerity, is the vital thing. Mr. Worthing, can you give me some explanation for why you pretended to have a brother? Was it so that you might have the opportunity of coming up to town to see me as often as possible?
Can you doubt it, Miss Fairfax?
I have the gravest doubts upon the subject, but I intend to crush them. Not the moment for German skepticism. Their explanations appear to be quite satisfactory, especially Mr. Worthing's. That seems to me to have the stamp of truth upon it.
I am quite content with what Mr. Moncrief said. His voice alone inspires one with absolute credulity.
Then you think we should forgive them?
Yes. I mean, no.
I had forgotten. There are principles at stake that one cannot surrender. Which of us should tell them? The task is not a pleasant one.
Couldn't we both speak at the same time?
An excellent idea. I nearly always speak at the same time as other people. Will you take the time from me?
Certainly.
Your
Christian names are still an insuperable barrier, that is all.
Our Christian names? Is that all? But we are going to be christened this afternoon.
For my sake, you are prepared to do this terrible thing?
I am.
To please me, you are ready to face this fearful ordeal?
I am.
How absurd to talk of equality of the sexes. Where questions of self-sacrifice are concerned, men are infinitely beyond us.
We are!
They have moments of physical courage, of which we women know absolutely nothing.
Darling.
Good heavens!
What does this mean?
Merely that I am engaged to marry Mr. Worthing, Mamma.
Come here. Sit down. Sit down immediately. Hesitation of any kind is a sign of mental decay and physical weakness in the old. Apprised, sir, of my daughter's sudden flight by her trusty maid whose confidence I purchased by means of a small coin. I followed it at once by a luggage train. Her unhappy father is, I am glad to say, under the impression that she is attending a more than usually lengthy lecture on the influence of a permanent income on thought. I do not propose to undeceive him, but of course you, sir, will clearly understand that all communication between yourself and my daughter must cease immediately from this moment. Upon this point, as indeed on all points, I am firm.
I am engaged to Gwendolyn Lady Bracknell.
You are nothing of the kind. And now, as regards Alderman. Alderman,
Yes, Aunt Augusta.
may I ask if it is in this house that your invalid friend Mr. Bunbury resides?
Oh no, Bunbury doesn't live here. Bunbury is somewhere else at present. In fact, Bunbury is dead.
Dead? When did he die? His death must have been extremely sudden.
I killed him this afternoon. I mean, poor Bunbury died this afternoon.
Of what did he die?
Bunbury? Oh, he was quite exploded.
exploded? Was he the victim of a revolutionary outrage? If so, he is properly punished for his morbidity.
My dear Aunt Augusta, I mean that the doctors found out that Bunbury could not live, and so Bunbury died. That is all.
He must have had great confidence in the opinion of his physician. And I am glad, however, that he made up his mind at the last to some definite course of action and acted upon proper medical advice. And now, Mr. Wilde, that we have got rid of this Mr. Bunbury, may I ask whose hand my nephew Algernon is now holding in what seems to me a peculiarly unnecessary manner?
That lady is Miss Gwendolyn Cardew, my ward.
I'm engaged to be married to Cecily, Aunt Augusta.
I beg your pardon.
Mr. Moncrief and I are engaged to be married, Lady Bracknell.
I do not know if there is anything peculiarly exciting in the air of this part of Hertfordshire, but the number of engagements that goes on seems to me considerably above the proper average that statistics has laid down for our guidance. Mr. Worthy, is Miss Cardew at all related to any of the larger railway stations in Germany? I merely desire information. Until yesterday, I had no idea that there were families or persons whose origin was a terminus.
Miss Cecily Cardew's grandfather was the late Mr. Thomas Cardew of 149 Belgrave Square, SW. Gervais Park, Dorking, Surrey, and the Sporran, Fifeshire, NB.
That is not unsatisfactory. Three addresses inspire confidence even in tradesmen. But what proof have I of their authenticity?
I have carefully preserved the court records of the period. Lady Bracknell, they are open for your inspection.
I have no strange errors in that publication.
Oh, Miss Cardew's family solicitors are Messrs. Markby, and Markby.
Markby, and Markby. A firm with the very highest position in their profession. Indeed, I am told that one of the Mr. Markbys is occasionally to be seen at dinner parties. So far, I am satisfied.
Well, that's extremely kind of you, Lady Bracknell. I also have in my possession, you will be glad to know, certificates of Miss Cardew's birth, baptism, whooping cough, registration, vaccination, confirmation, and the measles, both the German and the English variety.
A life crowded with incident, I see. Although perhaps somewhat too exciting for a young girl, I myself am not in favor of premature experience. Gwendolyn, the time approaches for our departure. We have not a moment to lose. As a matter of form, Mr. Worthing, I'd better ask you if Miss Cardew has any little fortune.
Oh, about £130,000 in the funds, I believe. Goodbye, Lady Bracknell. So pleased to have seen you.
Ah, a moment, Mr. Worthing. £130,000. And in the funds. Miss Cardew seems to be a most attractive young lady. Come over here, dear. Your dress is simply, and your hair seems almost as nature might have left it. But we can soon alter all that. A thoroughly experienced French maid produces a really marvelous result in a very brief space of time. I remember recommending one to young Lady Lansing, and in just 3 months, her own husband did not know her.
And in 6 months, nobody knew her.
Dear child, kindly turn round. No. The side view is what I want. Yes, quite as I expected. There are distinct social possibilities in your profile. The 2 weak points in our age are its want of principle and its want of profile. The chin a little higher, dear. Yes. style largely depends on the way the chin is worn, and they are worn very high just at the present. Also,
Yes, Aunt Augusta.
there are distinct social possibilities in Miss Cardew's profile.
Cecily is the sweetest, dearest, prettiest girl in the whole world, and I don't care tuppence about social possibilities.
Never speak disrespectfully of society all alone. Only people who can't get into it do that. Dear child, of course you know that Algernon has nothing but his debts to depend on. But I am not in favour of mercenary marriages. When I married Lord Bracknell, I had no fortune of any kind, but I never dreamed for a moment of allowing that to stand in my way. I suppose I must give my consent.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
And Cecily, you may kiss me.
Thank you, Lady Bracknell.
And you may address me as Aunt Augusta for the future.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
The marriage, I think, had better take place quite soon.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
To speak frankly, I am not in favour of long engagements. They give people the opportunity of discovering each other's character before marriage, which I think is never advisable.
I beg your pardon for interrupting you, Lady Bracknell, but this engagement is quite out of the question. I am Miss Cardew's guardian, and she cannot marry without my consent until she comes of age. That consent I absolutely decline to give.
Upon what grounds, may I ask? Algernon is an extremely, I might almost say, ostentatiously eligible young man. He has nothing, but he looks everything. What more can we desire?
It pains me very much to have to speak frankly to you, Lady Bracknell, about your nephew, but I'm afraid I do not approve of his moral character. I suspect him of being untruthful.
Untruthful? My nephew Algernon? Impossible, he is an Oxonian.
Yep, I'm afraid there can be no possible doubt about the matter. This afternoon, during my temporary absence in London, on an important question of romance, he succeeded in gaining entrance to my house by means of a false pretense of being my brother. During the course of the afternoon, under an assumed name, he succeeded in alienating the affections of my only ward. He subsequently staged a tea and devoured every single moment. What makes this conduct all the more heartless is that he knew from the first that I do not have a brother, that I never had a brother, and that I don't intend to have a brother.
Mr. Wilde, upon careful consideration, I have decided entirely to overlook my nephew's conduct to you.
Oh, that is very generous of you, Lady Bracknell, but my decision is unalterable. I decline to give my consent.
Come over here, dear. How old are you, sweet child?
Well, I am really only 18, but I always admit to 20 when I go to evening parties.
You are perfectly right in making some slight alteration. Indeed, no woman should ever be quite accurate about her age. It looks so calculating. 18, but admitting to 20 at evening parties. Well, it will not be very long before you are of age and free from the restraints of tutelage. So I don't think that your guardian's consent is, after all, a matter of any importance.
Pray forgive me for interrupting you again, Lady Bracknell, but I think it only fair to inform you that under the terms of her grandfather's will, Miss Cardew does not come of age until she is 35.
That does not seem to me to be a grave objection. 35 is a very attractive age. London society is full of women of the very highest birth who have remained of their own free choice 35 for years. Lady Dumbleton is an instance in point. To my own knowledge, she has been 35 ever since she arrived at the age of 40. And that was many years ago now. I see no reason why our dear Cecily should not be even still more attractive at the age you mention than she is at present. There will be a large accumulation of property.
Auntie, could you wait for me till I was 35?
Of course I could, Cecily. You know I could.
Yes, I felt it instinctively, but I couldn't wait all that time. I hate waiting even 5 minutes for anybody. It always makes me rather cross. I am not punctual, I know, but I do like punctuality in others. And waiting, even to be married, is quite out of the question.
Then what is to be done?
I don't know, Mr. Moncrief.
My good Mr. Worthing, since Miss Cardew states positively that she cannot wait till she is 35, a remark which I am bound to say seems to me to display a certain impatient nature, I would beg of you to reconsider your decision.
But, my dear Lady Bracknell, the matter is entirely in your own hands. The moment you consent to my marriage to Gwendolen, I would gladly give my consent to an alliance between your nephew and my ward.
You must be quite aware that what you propose is out of the question.
Then a passionate celibacy is all any of us can look forward to.
That is not the destiny I propose for Gwendolen. Algernon can, of course, choose for himself. Come, dear, we've already missed 5, if not 6 trains. To miss any more might expose us to comment on the platform.
Everything is quite ready for the christenings.
The christenings? Is not that somewhat premature?
Both these gentlemen have expressed a desire for immediate baptism.
At their age, the idea is grotesque and irreligious. Also, I forbid you to be baptized. I will not hear of such excesses. Lord Bracknell would be highly displeased if he discovered that that was the way in which you spent, indeed wasted, your time and money.
Am I to understand, then, there to be no baptisms at all this afternoon?
I don't think as things stand now it would be of much practical value to either of us, Dr. Chasuble.
I am grieved to hear such sentiments from you, Mr. Worthing. They savor of the heretical views of the Anabaptists. Views that I have completely refuted in 4 of my unpublished sermons. But, as you seem to be in a mood peculiarly secular, I will return to the church at once. Indeed, I have just been informed by the pew opener that for the last hour and a half, Miss Prism has been waiting for me in the...
Miss Prism? Did I hear you mention a Miss Prism?
Yes, Lady Bracknell, I'm on my way to join her.
A moment, Dr. Chasuble. Is this Miss Prism a female? A repellent aspect, remotely connected with education?
She is the most cultivated of ladies, and the very picture of respectability.
It is obviously the same person. May I ask what position she holds in your household?
I am a celibate, madam.
Miss Prism, Lady Bracknell, has for the past 3 years been Miss Cardew's esteemed governess and valued companion.
I must speak to the whatever I hear of this woman, I must speak to her at once. Let her be sent for.
But she approaches. She is nigh.
She was told you expected me in the vestry, dear Canon. I've been waiting for you there for 1 hour and 3/4.
Prism, come here, Prism. Prism, where is that baby? 38 years ago, Prism, you left the house of Lord Bracknell at number 104, Upper Grosvenor Street, in charge of a perambulator that contained a baby of the male sex. You never returned. A few weeks later, the perambulator was discovered through the elaborate investigations of the Metropolitan Police, standing by itself at midnight on a remote corner of Bayswater. The baby was not there. It contained a manuscript of a 3-volume novel of a more than repellent sentimentality. But the baby was not there, Prism. Where is that baby?
Lady Bracknell, I admit with shame that I do not know. I only wish that I did. The plain facts of the case are these. On the morning of the day you mention, a day that is forever burned in my memory, I prepared as usual to take the baby out in its perambulator. I had also with me a somewhat old but capacious handbag, in which I had intended to place the manuscript of a work of fiction that I had written in my few unoccupied hours. In a moment of mental abstraction for which I could never forgive myself, I deposited the manuscript in the bassinet and placed the baby in the handbag.
But where did you deposit the handbag?
Do not ask me, Mr. Worthing.
Oh, Miss Prism, this is a matter of no small importance to me. I insist on knowing where you placed the handbag that contained that infant.
I left it in the cloakroom of one of the larger railway stations in London.
What railway station?
Victoria, the Brighton line.
Oh, I must retire to my room for a moment. Wait here for me, Gwendolyn.
If you are not too long, I will wait here for you all my life.
What do you think this means, Lady Bracknell?
I hardly dare suspect, Dr. Chasuble. I need hardly tell you that in families of high position, strange coincidences are not supposed to occur. They are hardly considered a thing.
Uncle Jack seems strangely agitated.
Your guardian is a very emotional nature.
This noise is extremely unpleasant. It sounds as if you were having an argument. I dislike arguments of any kind. They are always vulgar and often convincing.
But it's stopped now.
I wish you would arrive at some conclusion.
This suspense is terrible. I hope it will last.
Miss Prism, is this the handbag? Examine it carefully before you speak. The happiness of more than one life depends on your answer.
It seems to be mine. Yes, here is the injury it received through the upsetting of a Gore Street omnibus in younger and happier days. Here, on the lining, is the stain caused by the explosion of a temperance beverage, an incident that occurred in Leamington. Here, on the lock, are my initials. I had forgotten that in an extravagant mood I had them placed there. The bag is undoubtedly mine. I am delighted to have it so unexpectedly restored to me. It's been a great inconvenience being without it for all these years.
Miss Prism, more is restored to you than this handbag. I was the baby you placed in it!
You?
Yes, mother!
I am unmarried.
Ah, unmarried? Oh, I cannot deny that this is a serious blow. But who then has the right to cast a stone on one who has suffered? Cannot repentance wipe out folly? Why should there be one law for men and another for women? Mother, I forgive you.
Mr. Worthing, you are mistaken. There is some error. There is the lady who can tell you who you really are.
Lady Bracknell, I hate to seem inquisitive, but would you mind telling me who I am?
I'm afraid that the news I have to give you will not altogether please you. You are the son of my poor sister, Mrs. Moncrief, and consequently, Algernon's elder brother.
Algy's older brother? I always knew I had a brother. I had a brother after all. I always said I had a brother. Cecily, how could you have ever doubted that I had a brother? Dr. Chasuble, my unfortunate brother. Miss Prism, my unfortunate brother. Gwendolyn, my unfortunate brother. Algy, you young scoundrel, you will have to treat me with more respect in the future. You have never behaved as a brother to me in all my life.
Well, not till today, old boy. But I did my best. I was out of practice, though.
My own. What own are you? What is your Christian name? now that you have become someone else.
Oh, good heavens, I quite forgot that point. Your decision on the matter of my name is quite irrevocable, I suppose?
I never change, except in my affections.
What a noble nature you have, Gwendolyn.
Then the Christian had better be cleared up at once. A moment, Aunt Augusta. At the time when Miss Prism deposited me in the handbag, had I been christened already?
Every luxury that money could buy, including christening, was bestowed upon you by your fond and loving parents.
Oh, then I was christened. That settles that matter. Well, what name was I given? Let me know the worst.
Being the eldest son, you were naturally christened after your father.
Yes, but what was our father's Christian name?
I cannot at the present recall. I have no doubt that he had one. He was eccentric, I will admit, but that was only the result of the injured climate, and marriage, and indigestion, and other things of that kind.
Algy, can't you recollect what our father's Christian name was?
My dear boy, we were not even on speaking terms. He died before I was a year old.
His name would appear in the army list of the period, I suppose, Aunt Augusta.
The general was essentially a man of peace, except in his domestic life. But I have no doubt that his name would appear in any military directory.
The army list of the last 40 years are here. I should have made these delightful records my constant study. M. Generals. Generals. Malum. Maxbaum. Magley. What ghastly names they have. Marksby. Migsby. Mobs. Moncrief. Lieutenant, 1840. Count. Lieutenant Colonel. General, 1869. Christian names. Earnest John. Gwendolyn. I always told you my name was Ernest. Well, it's Ernest after all. I mean, it naturally is Ernest.
I now recall that the general's name was called Earnest. I knew I had some particular reason for disliking the name.
Ernest, my own darling, I felt from the first that you could have no other name.
My own one. It is a terrible thing for a man to realize suddenly that all his life he has been speaking nothing but the truth. Can you forgive me?
I can, for I feel that you are sure to change.
Tisha!
Frederick! At last!
Cecily, at last.
Gwendolyn, at last!
My nephew, you seem to be speaking in trivialities.
On the contrary, Aunt Augusta, I've now realized for the first time in my life the vital importance of being earnest.
So I'd like to introduce you. Where are they? I hope the set designing crew, the designer is Jean Allen, the crew, Dave. And his this restaurant and helped let us rehearse here and eat here and mess it up all the time for him. So, and Lalo, his two, Lalo and Pedro. But by no means least, our production manager, our publicity person, the person who kept us all absolutely focused, Lynn. At the beginning, this, as you know, is a production of the Left Bank Readers Theater, and Charles is the I'm going to quickly put up tables and chairs, and I hope that as many of you can will stay for a drink, a meal, and share it with the actors in about 5 minutes.